some of you might have heard about Jax before. In a previous episode, we were talking about her. And in that episode, as often happens in my life, we decided we're going to do another one where she will speak to us about the dangers of the internet, as well as Facebook, and I believe cell phones for children. Now, why is her opinion important? Jax, tell us who you are.
Sure. Where to begin? I'm a single mom. First and foremost, something I'm very proud of. I have 3 wonderful children. And my business partner and I run the Pink Ladies here in South Africa. We work nationally and internationally. And our business is finding missing children and adults and saving lives.
Jax, you just disappeared. I have to say to the listeners here that Jax is in Port Elizabeth and the wind is blowing there today. And therefore the bandwidth isn't what it should be and what she's paying for, which is also why we only have her on voice and not on video. Jax, can you repeat how many people you're getting back?
Sure. Our rate of recovery at the moment is roughly 97–98%, something we're very, very proud of. Unfortunately, yes, some of them do turn out to be deceased, but the important thing then would be closure for the families. And it's something that we are very, very proud of.
And this record has been built up, I understand, over a period of 15 years.
That's correct. In fact, unfortunately, nobody can see it, but on the wall behind me, I have a poster that goes back to an interview that I did many, many years ago now. And at that stage, our recovery rate was 87%. So it's taken us 15 years, but we're almost at 100% now.
I just also need to say here that this is a registered charity under South African law. In their history, they've never had any irregularities with money. It's a clean organization. I know them, I support them, and so do the George and James fellow. He even called one of his ski boats in the books as Pink Ladies. Actually called it a pink slot there, but that's an internal joke. It is after this very person which we are speaking to right now.
And something I feel very honored for.
Yes, and I'm more bold than Jax here. I will tell you here straight, if you can afford to support this organization, please do so. Financially, with your time, whatever you can do, bandwidth, every little bit of assistance will help. If you go to their website, I will flash all the details here in front of the screen. Please go there, have a look around and do what you think is right.
Absolutely. We more than appreciate any kind of help that we can get. We have roughly 100,000 volunteers across South Africa and beyond at this stage. People come and go. Our punchline is family first. So all volunteers know that they can come and go as they please and help when they can. And as you say, yes, it does unfortunately cost money to do something like this. And we have to rely on the little bit of donation that we do get, because I'm not working at the moment. Unfortunately, a virus which shall not be named took away my employment last year in March. So we're all pretty much running on shoestrings. But one thing we were determined to do is not let it affect our operations. So we put in as much as we can, and we just hope and pray that the public will come and jump in and help us as well.
Well, there's nothing wrong in asking, and there's nothing wrong in helping a deserving cause. Jax here is a bit peculiar. I said it in the previous one too, but please remember, folks, I don't know which ones you've looked at, so if I repeat myself, don't get angry with me. Somebody might have clicked on this one and perhaps not the previous one. I hope you would click on the other ones as well, but worth listening to. But Jax is a strange person, or peculiar, let me say peculiar. But she actually read both my own books, the Mean Streets books and some of the others. as well as she read a fellow called George M. James, who's a sponsor of this channel. George M. James is a man who wrote many books, more than 50. The news there is that the latest one, when it comes out, and I don't know when, will feature Jack's mom's, late mom, as a name, perhaps even Jacqui herself. It's also known as the Codename books. And he also wrote a book on child trafficking, human trafficking, called, I think, Codename 1 Alpha. It's a long book. It's probably close to 600 pages, but it's filled with facts and figures which will really make you ashamed of what people are up to in this world. He says there, and I'm just talking out of my head now, I've read the book when it came out about 2 or 3 years ago, that about more than 30 million people, 30. My wife always tells me I should say 30 because the way I say 50 in English might even be 500 or something. There's more than 30 million slaves in this world as we sit here today. Yes, slaves, people who are like in the old days. These things happen. And of course, with these people, sexual misconduct and abuse upon them is almost normal, if I can use that word as well. Now, to tell you how many people that is, you can take New York and I believe Paris and another few cities and put them all together, and you still will not be at 50 million. Now, that's a tremendous amount of people. In Africa, you can take Lagos, the Nigerian city, and it's big. I've been there. And you put all those people in chains, and then you can start imagining what's happening here. Now, Jax is here today to tell us the dangers which exist when a child is on Facebook or one of these social groups. You know, social media, it's a very big thing, and it can be used. Of course, it can be good, but it can also be bad. Jax, please start talking. Tell us, what should parents look for? What have you experienced?
So there's just so much to talk about here. As I've said before, we could do this for days and days and days without end. Social media generally can be a wonderful tool for business, for communication, especially in a difficult time like this where we can't get together physically. And I must admit that in the early days, when Mixit first became a big name in the world, we were using that very same tool to bring children back that had been tempted and talked out and groomed out of their homes to meet with pedophiles and so on. In fact, one of our very interesting cases, I was literally on Mixit talking to a pedophile who had a young girl with him at a coffee shop in Johannesburg when the Child Protection Unit swooped in and arrested him literally while we were talking. I'd gone in as a plant, as a friend of this girl who she was going to help bring into this man's clutches as well. And it was through Mixit that we managed to make an arrest in that case. So the very same tool that lures children away and that can be extremely dangerous to them can be as vital in bringing them back. We must never forget that. But like I said in one of the analogies that we use in our talks, a parent would not put a loaded gun in a child's hand and walk away. And the same applies to smart devices, social media. You know, it's just irresponsible, completely irresponsible. That child does not have the level of responsibility needed to be able to handle that kind of information, input and output. And we've got to bear that in mind. We often say as well, if you have a cell phone that you're going to give your young child, and I mean, I'm talking now 4, 5, 6-year-old children that I've seen, even in working environments where people that I've worked with have been quite happy to hand their tablet over to the 5 or 6-year-old child who then goes into another room and sits and watches. YouTube, Facebook, all of them are fraught with pedophiles who are out there looking for children. And unless you know what to look for and what to spot, you would fall into their trap so easily. I've seen adults being taken in by these people. They're good at what they do. As much as we have law enforcement agencies and so on that are geared up to look for this kind of thing, we forget sometimes that the criminals are just as well versed in how to use these tools to get to children. And we need to be responsible about that.
May I ask a question? Yeah, I will remember where you were. Is there such a thing as a profile for a pedophile?
Yes and no. From a purely a citizen's point of view, until you've been involved in these kinds of cases and you don't know what to look for, you would never spot them. I know I can tell from previous interactions when I was a younger person, talking on chat rooms, old IRC chat rooms and so on, that I bumped into these people over and over and over. And I started to see, luckily, because I had a psychology background and legal background, I could spot these things a little more easily than others. But you could walk past the guy in the street, and not only guys, we have female pedophiles as well. That's something that is very important for people to realize. Your neighbor, your best friend, family member, it's possible, and it does happen. We see it all day, every day. And unfortunately, there's no guideline that you could, this sort of knowledge is not something that you can impart to someone easily. It's something that's ingrained into you to know what to look for, having had these experiences and dealing with these people.
So basically, it's not like in the movies where you can see this guy is just a damn creep. He might be very normal, even respected.
Absolutely. But there again, with the caveat is animals and children are seldom wrong when it comes to those kind of people. Watch your children. Watch your children's reaction to people. Children have what I refer to as the special sixth sense. And if you know, especially in the colored communities and in the Afrikaner communities, we very, very easily tell our children, oh, go sit on the uncle's lap and go talk to that auntie. She's nice. Give her a hug. Give her a kiss. If a child does not want to interact with somebody because they're picking it up, their sixth sense is picking it up. Do not force them to. Don't do it. The same way with an animal. Animals know which people like them. And a dog or a cat will not go to a person if they get that feeling, that gut feeling that tells them. It's instinct. And it's ingrained into every single living being. Don't ignore it. It could save a life.
Okay, but would I be correct to say that it is mostly men, a little bit of female, and very seldom couples?
Generally, yes. Generally speaking, I would say so, although we are now seeing more and more females. And unfortunately, I think also if you look at history, there are sort of on the psychopathic range. Very often now we're finding couples are involved. They cover for each other. And whereas very often the woman is drawn into it by her partner, it doesn't often happen the other way around, where a man will be drawn into that sort of situation. So there is a dynamic that's changing all the time, but yes, for the most part, I'd say you are correct.
I've heard somewhere that these pedophiles deliberately target organizations as well as people which I think they can get away with it, or which gives them a sense of power. So we will talk about people who work for the church, and I'm not pointing fingers at any church now, and people who say working for an aid organization, even when you're working with children, that they infiltrate these organizations to commit their crimes. Is there any truth in this?
Absolutely, I can vouch for that 100%. When we started this organization, in the first year or two that we started, we were approached by a gentleman who was very well connected in the political sphere, who sort of almost forced himself on us. To me, he always seemed over-eager. And because we like to see the good in people, and we like to believe that people are intrinsically good, we gave him a little bit of it to be well connected with the media and so on. But we watched him like a hawk, and it was only a matter of weeks or at the most months before we knew that there was something that just wasn't right here. And we expelled him from our organization, completely cut ties with him. And he, strangely enough, went on to create a very similar organization to ours. Obviously, I'm not going to mention names or anything. And this gentleman promoted himself as this child lover, human being savior. He could do nothing wrong. And sad to say, eventually, as we know, the truth always comes out in the end. And this man committed suicide a couple of years ago. And the laptop that he'd stolen from somebody and that he left behind was filled with pornographic images of children. So he'd covertly been exactly in the situation that we're talking about now, where he was inserting himself into situations and into organizations so that he could have access to children.
And I suppose one of the ways that they do it is online, where they deliberately target children. I've also heard, you can confirm or deny, please tell us, that a man will marry a woman to get to a child, or be in a relationship at least.
Absolutely. I've seen it over and over and over with stood in. And I've seen it in my own life, unfortunately, where a gentleman that I was involved with, unbeknown to me while I was at work, was taking one of my young daughters down to a local pub, basically, lavishing her with attention and buying her things and telling her not to tell mom, because she and he both knew that if I knew, I'd put a stop to it. Fortunately, nothing untoward happened physically, but the emotional scars are definitely there.
That's called grooming, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about that, because it's one of the ways which they give themselves away. We will get back to the internet. I've made notes. But tell me, what's the classic grooming look like?
Very often these guys will frequent chat rooms and, sort of social media platforms where there are children, and they will very often create a profile which appears to be much younger than they are. And this can go on for months and months before they meet the child. And in many instances, they never actually do meet the child, but they create this persona who will either come forward as a person of similar interests, similar age group, similar life problems at home, and draw the child into their world until the child becomes dependent on them almost. They create a relationship with the child where the child actually psychologically or emotionally needs them. And then very often you also have this sort of scenario with the Stockholm effect, where when this is all comes to the fore and somebody becomes aware of what's going on and puts a stop to it, the child becomes incredibly angry because they feel like they've been done in. They feel like they've lost something, without realizing that this person actually intended them harm.
Well, Jacques, it's a real privilege for us to speak to you. And if I interrupt you somewhere, tell me to keep quiet and carry on. But my police and legal brain is running here while you speak. I've heard about cases, again, you can confirm or deny, that they will get this child, even if it's perhaps we should start with age. It's not only babies. We're talking here about perhaps an older girl who's already reached puberty, but he's still under the legal age of consensual sex. I think that's what we mean when we discuss here. And that I've heard that they would get her or him to take pictures of the private parts, the chest area or the lower parts. And once they've done that, they start the blackmail process. Is there any truth in that?
Absolute truth. There's no two ways about it. Seen it, been involved in cases with it. In fact, our own children have been had instances where they've applied for jobs even as very young kids, sort of just school leaving age. And these guys would try and draw them into this with an offer of a job. Then it becomes, send us a photograph so that we know what you look like if you're going to apply for this job. And then it's usually not long before the child is then coerced into, put something pretty on. Show me what you really look like, because, how badly do you want this job? How badly do you want to be my friend? And it's coercion. There's no two ways about it. And the moment that person feels that they have enough to exert some sort of control over the child or the young person, they will do it, and brutally, absolutely brutally. I mean, you show me any young person starting out in life and I mean, we know reputation and that sort of thing means everything, especially to a person of that age. And suddenly they're faced with, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, this person is going to ruin my life. And that's also where we encourage parents to be so much more involved in your children's lives. Your children need to know that if something like this happens, they can come to you and tell you exactly what's happened without you making them feel shameful about what has happened. Because believe me, it happens to adults as well. It's not because they're a child. It can happen to anybody.
So this grooming is always sexual?
Almost always, although very often it does start as I say, an emotional sort of bond. Tell me your deepest, darkest secrets, and I'll help you, and I'll give you advice. And they pull the child into their will. And when that child gets to a point where they trust them, or they feel that the child trusts them enough, they will start pushing those boundaries. And it'll be, show me what you look like in a bikini. Show me what you look like in a pair of shorts. And sometimes it's gradual, sometimes it's not. Sometimes these people go all out, and it becomes sexual almost from the word go. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
And of course, I think they are quite smooth fellows as well. They will say, "Oh, you look so pretty," and show us a bit more. The usual, what did we call it in our young days? Chat up or chatting. I can't remember.
Yes. No, absolutely. They are so. These people are not stupid that do this. They're as intelligent, if not sometimes more intelligent than us who are trying to find them. They teach themselves how to do these things. I mean, if you had to look at the search history on a computer of somebody who does this sort of thing, and I've seen it myself with my own eyes, they will go and watch YouTube videos of how to influence people, how to make people believe what you're saying. They study what they do. For some of them, it's like a job. It's their intention, and they go out and they do it, and they will learn every trick of the trade to enable them to do it.
Just last week, I think here in Europe, we read in the newspapers that some horrible child pornographic ring online was taken down in Berlin, in Germany. Which seems to me that they share these things, if I can say it like that. They do have connections with each other. And then they can almost, you want to abuse the child here, they can hand the child over to be abused to a mate of theirs. Is that too far-fetched, or is that possible that you have like a ring?
That is not at all far-fetched. These guys have systems and connections that are so far-reaching that a child's something so simple as a mom putting up a picture of her child on Facebook because she's proud of her child and wants to show her child off. We've got guys that troll the net looking for those pictures. And that picture, no matter how innocent it may look, can be broadcast on a pedophile network. And these guys get great pleasure out of it. And what people also don't realize is once that photograph is out there in this situation, or where a child has been coerced into sending a photograph of them in a compromising position, every time that photograph is viewed by a new person, a new crime has taken place. It's a further assault on that child's integrity. And it never goes away. Once, we all know what it's like. Once a photograph or a piece of writing is out on the internet, it's out there forever. You will never get rid of it.
So the best way would be to never ever to send this private type of pictures to anybody, ever.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we've seen how revenge porn has taken over, where a couple has a fight and then next thing the male or female releases compromising photographs of their partner. And once that photo is out there and it's been downloaded, you will never destroy all the copies of it, ever.
Yeah, it's a sad, I often say to people, there are different levels of life. There's where you are, and I would hope most of the people listening here. But let's also be certain that the pedophiles do listen to programs like this to find out exactly how you can trace them, so we're not going to tell them anything like that. But there are different levels, you get your espionage guys, you get your criminal element, and then you get these animals. So I don't think they're human. And I want to go back.
They're a breed apart.
Yes, I was just thinking, legally speaking, as we were talking here, that the company, and I want the managing directors and the owners of companies now to listen very clearly to me, and to you, of course, who's the expert. But the company property, like a laptop and the use of the internet, it does not really have any privacy to it. If you have an
whatsoever.
Yes, if you have an issued laptop, there's nothing wrong for the company to now and then to check and to see what you're doing on it. So it's interesting to me that you say to me that you can see what they search for. Now, I don't want to get too technical, but the fact that you're on private mode does not mean anything, because it's still being recorded on your internet service provider. Isn't that right?
That is correct. In fact, over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing my research on what happens to these sort of things. Like, very often we've heard people recently saying, I was chatting to my friend recently about a product, let's say a breakfast cereal. And 2 days later, suddenly I get an advert for that same cereal on Facebook. There are people listening all the time. And I think we'd be very naive to think that that data is only stored for the period that they say it is. Once they've finished with it, it will go onto a data bank somewhere and it will stay there forever.
No, it's an obvious lie. I mean,
I
challenge absolutely.
We've got to take.
I will challenge absolutely anybody who's listening here. Do yourself a favor, go on YouTube right now. Search for anything you don't normally search for. Something you're really not interested in. And come back in an hour and see how they just flood you with that ads or that particular product. So there is an artificial intelligence behind it. And the problem with that is that you are now only getting one side. If you're like a conservative person, they're going to flood you with conservative views. You're never going to grow in life and to become, look at it a little bit more liberal, or perhaps the other side. And I don't mean now to the full extent of where you can go. I just mean to say you don't get a balanced view. And it's the same in reverse, of course. If you're a liberal person, you're not going to hear the conservative views, except it's going to be a few F words in between. That's no way to actually solve anything. I think it was Mr. Eisenhower who said that if you don't walk in the middle of a road, then you're in a gutter. We'll get to that. The point I wanted to make was just that the company has a duty upon himself, and in my eyes, from a legal viewpoint, to check these things on their laptops now and then, especially if they work with children. And if they then can find any type of such behavior, they have to have a systems in place to do something about it.
Absolutely, and very few companies do.
No, almost not. I mean, I've seen it with my hostage course.
Yes.
You would think people would say, before you send a man into danger or a woman into danger, let us talk to this fellow or this woman and just explain the life to them. And they don't do it. Less than 2% will do it. Negligence, it's criminal negligence in law.
Absolutely, and another thing that would stem from that, and something that I find incredibly frustrating, is forever, South Africa didn't have a registered sex offender list. And it was brought in, I think, if I speak under correction, but about 7 years ago, it became law in our country that they keep a list of registered sex offenders. In other countries, it is easy to search that sex offenders register. So if you're employing somebody, you can tell immediately whether they have a criminal record, what it was about, and you can make a decision based on that.
So would you recommend to look at it?
Absolutely. The problem, though, in South Africa is you have to apply to see that list, and you don't get to see the whole list. If you have somebody who comes to you as an employee in a child situation, let's say a daycare center or whatever, you have to fill in the forms and ask if they can please do a check on this person. So it's not freely available. And I have a huge problem with it.
Well, I hope there's some lawyer or somebody listening here who will pay a lawyer to go and get that sorted out. Because the purpose of a law here is quite clear. It is for people to be able to be researched so that they can be warned. And that's it. And these are convicted people, I suppose. It's not just anybody who's grabbed. So if the purpose of a law was that and the administrative duty behind it, or sledge, what do you call it, the red tape is so much, but the purpose of a law is not there anymore, then I think you have a very good case in law to have us overturned, in the sense that you can force them to make it public. Well, your sound went down a bit, but what I've heard, and I will just quickly repeat.
I think our connection dropped there for a moment again.
Yeah, it dropped a bit. Well, we understand it's these things happen. But what you basically said is that the sex offenders register is not freely available. And even if you want to check it, you have to ask the person you're checking permission. So if a guy comes and he wants to work as let's say a kindergarten teacher or something, then you will have to actually ask his permission to do so. Now, should he refuse to do so, of course, then that's enough reason for me not to appoint him. The problem with that type of thinking is that, I know in Switzerland, where I'm currently living, is where resumes are absolutely worthless, because you have to give him a good letter of conduct, no matter what he did or didn't do. You cannot say anything bad or negative about him. If he asks you for to tell the world in a letter on your official letterhead what a wonderful fellow he is, then you have to do it. You cannot even refuse to give it to him. Now, of course, that means to me automatically, if you're Swiss and you come to me for a job, well, I'm not going to appoint you on that letter you have of recommendation. And that's where the law went too far. It's a classic example where it's trying to do good, but it ends up doing more bad than good. And I think it's the same thing here with the sex offenders list. I mean, to me, this is absolutely shocking. It has to be overturned. Yes, you're back, and I started recording again.
Okay. You're going to be editing your heart out after this.
Yeah, I will be editing quite a bit, but you know what you're saying is so important that it really doesn't matter. People, I'm sure, will understand the reason here. It's easy when you
Yeah.
have internet and it's actually working. You see, that's even more reason for a big company to come and sponsor the pink ladies and the organization. So that, you know, you need good communications. This can save life, or it can cost a life if the communications are not working as it should.
Mm. Now, I don't know if you caught that last bit of what I was saying before I got cut off there and had to reconnect. My view is if you need to, or you need an organization to speak for you and tell me how wonderful you are, then there's obviously something wrong and I should be suspicious. If you can't get a job on merit and you need someone to sing praises for you, then I would be seriously worried about hiring somebody like that.
But you know, the other part is also right. Unless you are applying for a stripper job, there's really no logical reason for the fellow on the other side to see what your body looks like. Right, it seems that Jax is back. This is actually a classic example why we need to sponsor this company, why we need to ensure that they have the quickest internet possible, because lives can be lost and lives can be saved with good communication. And as it is, Jax have a lot of information which can save the life of your child. But it's useless if you don't hear it. Jax, you are back now, and it seems we've picked up a little bit of a better line. Can you tell us what are these predators? What are they looking for online and at Facebook? Because if we know what they're looking for, we know what not to do.
Okay, well, what I can start with, let's just give you a classic example. If you have a child who already feels marginalized and who's living in a desperate situation, that child is going to be desperate to find somebody that they can trust and that they can speak to that is not in the immediate circle. So you will find very often children like that won't have the strict measures of privacy on their social media accounts that others might have. They might broadcast to a larger audience and making sure that only our friends get our updates. They might post these publicly. And these guys will go and they'll look for profiles like that. They will look at the content that the child is putting out, the amount of emotion behind the content. God forbid that a child would actually say there, I'm having a really bad time at home, nobody loves me, because that makes them a target, unfortunately. And whereas in the real life sense, a child can stand on a street corner and shout for help because something bad is happening to them and more people will take notice. The internet gives this predator the perfect surroundings and the easiest way to get hold of this child because nobody else is going to see what he's doing or what his intentions are. And that child very much becomes a target. Children need to be educated on the content that they put out. I mean, I've looked at some, even my children's own Instagram accounts. Look, I must say, my kids are very good with that sort of thing. And if they anything untoward, even at the age that my twin girls are now, at going on 22, if they're approached by somebody that gives them a bad feeling or that they're not happy about, they'll come to me and they'll say, Mom, please look at these people and tell us what we should do, how we should deal with this situation. If you don't have somebody who's able to teach you those things and what to look for, it's dangerous. It's just downright dangerous. There's no two ways about it. And the same would apply to an adult, an adult female. Let's say somebody who's just gone through divorce or who's been in a bad relationship and is desperate for company and to have somebody to speak to. That is precisely what these people look for. Never forget that they are looking for, they're not looking for friends. and people that they can be nice to. You are prey, they're a predator. And that's something that it's a harsh reality you've got to face. And that's not to say that everybody has the intent, but it certainly makes it a lot easier for the ones who do.
So there's no sympathy out there.
No, you know, we're living in desperate times. It's become, especially in this last year, it's a case of survival. People are so wrapped up, even more so than in previous times, with their own survival and looking after their own interests, that they're not really looking at other people's problems. I'm finding this more and more, even amongst my own circle of friends, where somebody will contact you and ask how you are, and before you've even finished telling them that you're having a really tough time, they've already told you about their tough time that's even worse than yours, and you end up feeling guilty for telling them about yours in the first place. We're living in unprecedented times. Children are floundering. They cannot cope with this. They haven't been through it before. They don't have the benefit of experience. I would actually go as far as to say that if I was a child living in today's times, I wouldn't have known what to do with myself. I would have been in absolute despair. And it's only fortunate that I've been through these times that I'm able to pass this knowledge on to my children as well. At the moment, everything seems to be all about drama. The more drama there is going on, the better, and the more people tend to enjoy it. There's one thing that this COVID situation has taught me, and I said this when it first broke here in South Africa, is that this is an unprecedented time in our lives, and it will show us the true value of who the good and who the bad people are in this world. And I'm seeing it daily. And that's really what it is. You will honestly find out who your friends are, who your good family are, and who the people are that care about you. And you will also see the bad side of people that you thought were good people. It's an incredible eye-opener. But again, as I say, children are not equipped to deal with this. And we need to help them. Desperate than ever before as far as online predators. We have to acknowledge that it's going to become even more of a problem. It is more of a problem than it ever has been before.
Would you say that because of lockdowns and people are now living together with each other, that the increase rate of this abuse now has increased, or is it decreased?
Oh, it's definitely increased exponentially. It's off the charts. I mean, if one looks at the gender-based violence that is taking place, the family suicides, the abuse of children, the abuse of alcohol and drugs, we're at unprecedented levels. You know, if I was responsible for the number of people in our country and proposing a lockdown, that would have been the first thought on my mind. What is going to happen to these people when you take a child that's already being abused, now suddenly being locked up in a house 24/7 with an abuser and someone who's abusing alcohol, and then taking the alcohol away from that person, as happened here more than twice in South Africa, when alcohol was banned and smoking was banned. I mean, I know as a smoker, the first couple of weeks of not having cigarettes, because of course it was announced, and the announcement was made at 8 o'clock in the evening, and by 12 o'clock, that was cutoff time. And you couldn't go out and buy your next packet of cigarettes the next day. It was absolutely devastating. I mean, fortunately, you know, being an adult and being in the sort of work I do, I was better prepared for that. But I nearly lost my mind. I can only imagine what it must have been like out in the townships. To do that to somebody is absolutely cruel and inhumane.
Well, we've seen it because the statistics tells us that, you know, the abuse has now gone further. And that brings me to a point which people don't, I think, always think about. It's one thing to hear about that the pornographic sexual abuse of a child, it's always abuse. There is no such thing as consent, not in law and not in human nature. I want to hear stupid arguments from people. These things, these pictures, these videos, they had to be made somewhere. I mean, they didn't just appear there on the hard disk. So there must be an entire industry who's actually doing these things.
There is. There's a massive audience for it. That is the problem. I think our moral fiber of society has been so broken down over the years that it's pervasive. It does happen. It happens every day and all day. And as you say, one has to remember that every time you see or hear about a pornographic image or a video, a crime has taken place already. And every time that video or that photograph is viewed, another crime takes place. Because there's always a demand, and there's always someone prepared to fulfill that demand. And it's a perpetual cycle of abuse. Because as I say, a photograph and a video don't just go away. You cannot remove every single video and every single photograph off the internet. It's impossible.
Yeah, we talked about the blackmail scenario. So what advice directly, shortly, will you tell people listening here who's got a Facebook account or a social media account, we're not picking on Facebook themselves, and you have a child or you have a young adult at home, or perhaps you're even a grown-up. What advice do you have, Jack?
Well, yeah, I'll go back to something that my dear mom said. And that was, never put anything out there that you wouldn't want people to see. You would not go and stand naked on a street corner. I don't think any sane person would. Why on earth would you do it on a phone or on the internet?
Yeah, where there's millions of people, hundreds of billions of people who can actually then admire you.
Absolutely. And we should then also go very much back to what we did in days before we had cell phones and things. In those days, we would never put in writing something we weren't prepared to say to a person's face. Do you think now, just because a person's hiding behind a computer screen and you have the anonymity, do you think that makes it okay now? People need to understand this. And it seems to be sorely lacking.
My wife told me an interesting thing the other day, and I don't know if I said it in this clip or the previous one, but she is like a peace knot. She's not like me. And she said to me, this thing of having a thumbs up and a thumbs down has caused the entire generation and lots of other people as well to absolutely not think about things. It's either right or it's wrong, and there is no middle ground.
I agree with you. And children especially, because we're living in an age of instant gratification, one can only imagine the psychological effect something like that can have. Imagine you have a child who comes from a disadvantaged background of some sort, whether it's an alcoholic parent or conflict in the home or whatever, desperate for recognition, desperate for somebody to see them, to know them, and to care about them, that will put a photograph out on the net of themselves, perhaps in a pretty dress or whatever, saying, guys, this is the outfit I got today. Don't you think it looks nice? And they get 1 million thumbs down. What does that do to a person's self-esteem, especially a child? It's, again, as I say, self-gratification is a huge problem. But at the same time, we've got to look at, how do we stop this? How do we change it? And that is by being very careful about what we put out there. And for the child, from their point of view, we need to start caring about people. We need to take a longer, harder look at our relationships with people. Our children would not be out there doing this kind of thing if they felt comfortable with coming to their parents with their problems and with being able to approach their parents. Don't expect the TV and the internet to babysit your kids. It's the worst thing you can do. The same way you wouldn't invite a pedophile into your home to come and babysit your kids for an evening. Don't give your kids a smartphone or a camera if they don't know how to use it responsibly and safely.
I cannot agree with you more. It's not what people want to hear, but that's the truth, and we know it. But let us say now there's a concerned mom listening to us here, and she wants to, what does she do right now? Can she go onto the Facebook and have a good look at the pictures, which perhaps is posted there? Would that be a good first step?
Well, I think the first thing they have to do is be in a position of trust with your child. Trust your child and know that they trust you. Create that bond of trust. Because if you have that, your child will understand when you go to them and you say, darling, I think you've put a little bit of a risky picture up there. Let's talk about it. Let's look at it and discuss why it's a problem. You need to be able to open those channels to your children. I think many parents would be tempted to say to the kid, oh, for God's sake, look what you've posted. How dare you? You're stupid. Don't do that. Don't shame the child. They might not understand. They might not know why it's so dangerous to put that out there. Have a frank discussion with them.
Well, of course, if you say that to a child, he will not tell you the next time.
Absolutely.
He will start hiding it, and that doesn't help at all.
Absolutely, and that's why I, as a single parent, have kept those lines of communication open with my children. There's not one of my children that wouldn't be, they won't be embarrassed to come and tell me about something like that. I mean, I've had positions where my children have come to me and said, Mom, I said something I shouldn't have to someone, and they've now gone and told somebody else. What do I do? You need to be able to have those discussions, and you need to be able to help your children with those situations. Turning a blind eye is never going to fix it. Not in a million worlds, ever.
Would it also help, actually, if you go and look at who's befriended your child on Facebook and the others, not only Facebook?
Absolutely, and that's where I say as well, have a position of trust with your children. I mean, look at it from this point of view. If you put into your child's hand a smartphone, who's paying for that smartphone? You paying for it. Sit down with your child, draw up a contract. There's plenty of them open on the net. I can hand them out to people who need them as well. Draw up a contract. Let your child feel like a responsible person. Say to your child, let's draw up this contract. You act responsibility with the device that I've given you, and I'll help you with that. And you're free to use the device for whatever you want to, within certain limitations. And the moment that child oversteps those boundaries, there's got to be some sort of disciplinary action taken, or some sort of reaction from the parent. And you've got to be open, honest, and be kind. Sit the child down and say, look, this is what you did, this is what could happen, and why I don't want it to happen, and discuss it with them reasonably. Don't just take their cell phone away and scream and shout at them and tell them what a horrible, stupid person they are, because the first thing they're going to do is go out and try and get themselves another phone until you're doing the same thing behind your back. Be open and honest. You expect your child to be open and honest with you. You have to do the same thing with them.
Well, that's very true, because they can go to a mate and they can just ring up
remember that as a parent, I mean, we've had situations in cases like that before, where a child's gone missing, and the parent has said, but they couldn't have run off with anybody because I took their cell phone away last week, so they haven't been able to communicate with their friends. Well, let me tell you, unfortunately, that child goes to school and he borrows his friend's phone. We know of situations where children hire out their phones to friends who've had their phones taken away, and say to them, right, yeah, give me $5, you can have my phone for 10 minutes. And that puts them right back in contact with all the people that they might not, maybe they shouldn't be in contact with.
Okay, now I have to ask you, would a child which is been caught up into this type of thing change in behavior? And if so, how?
Oh, yeah, there's no two ways about it. If you notice that your child tends to spend a lot of time in a room with a closed door when they have their own PC, tablets, or smartphone available, if they become a lot more unsociable, don't want to participate in families and spend time with their parents, I would say there's cause for concern because that child is hiding something from you. I'm not saying that the child is wrong for doing it, but you need to be, as a parent, you need to be aware of those sort of things. It's no different to a child or an adult who gets lured into a cult. It becomes a secretive thing and they won't tell anybody about it. And when they get into trouble, who do they turn to?
And I also think I get a bit defensive if you should mention it.
Absolutely. Extremely defensive. And they will fight tooth and nail to keep those lines of communication open. Remember that these predators understand psychology and they understand the psychology of a child, and they will manipulate. That is one of the biggest things, is the manipulation. It's horrendous, and it does happen, and we need to be open to these sort of things. Parents need to educate themselves.
So a child has to understand that he can come to mommy or daddy and talk honestly and openly without being, beaten up afterwards, whether physically or mentally.
Yes, you need to have that bond of trust established between you and your child, that when something goes wrong in that child's life or they get into a difficult position through perhaps passing on a photograph they shouldn't have, that child needs to be comfortable with talking to you about it. Or at the very least, if not with you, with a child's, perhaps a school counselor or somebody in a position of authority that can assist them. They need to know that they won't be punished for becoming a victim. Shaming is something that I talk a lot about as well. And unfortunately, in our society, there tends to be this trend that when a person becomes a victim, they are called stupid, naive, irresponsible. Instead of first reaching out and saying, what can we do to stop this and to help the person? Very often people and groups of people form this sort of lynch mob against the victim rather than against the perpetrator. And that needs to stop.
Have you ever encountered a case, Jacques, of volkshuispolitiek, where parents just don't want to know? They just live in some kind of a denial.
Yes, we have, and I see it very often, where a parent doesn't know how to respond to a thing like that, and whether it be for their own self-preservation or peace of mind, or sometimes for entirely crazy reasons, just pretend it didn't happen, because then they don't have to deal with it.
So now we're back where a man can actually date a woman to get to a child or to a daughter or little boy, and she's so in love or so financially linked to this fellow that she just turns a blind eye and she will not defend her own child.
In fact, again, I can't mention names, dates, or places, but we've had a case where a young girl, she was approximately 19 or so, went missing. It turned out that her stepfather had murdered her because she refused his sexual advances. And not only that, it turned out that this was the third relationship that he'd been in to get access to children. So he was a repeat offender. And it does happen. It really does happen. It sounds like something that happens in the movies or would only happen in another country, but it happens here in our country, South Africa. Africa as well.
So if I get you right, Jacques, these people actually go out and target people by hunting down.
They do. It's no different to a cheetah on the plains hunting down a gazelle. They have a mission. They know how to do it. They study it. It's part of their life. This is how they operate. And like they say, a leopard doesn't change their spots. These people are, in my mind, and I know that a lot of doctors and psychiatrists and so on would disagree with me, but this is not a curable problem.
Okay, so that brings me back to the sex offenders list. Because once on it, even if a guy says he made a mistake, it was a few years ago, he's probably lying to you. I'm talking practical now. I'm not interested in psychology. I have feelings about psychologists, which is unprintable. Seems we've lost Jacques again. But this is fascinating. You know, I do know that it's worth your while to listen here, because you don't know when such a thing comes across you. And we would like to think that we can, you know, deal with it, but it's not that easy.
Okay, hopefully I'm back again.
Yes, you're back again. I will just edit a bit. I can see this editing is going to take.
Yeah, one of the things that I've often said, and Des has said as well, is my dream for this organization is to be in a position where I don't have to go out and work 8 hours a day at an office making money for somebody else. This is my passion. This is what I do. It just feels right.
Well, how can it ever be wrong to help children who need help, as well as other vulnerable people? I think that's one of the reasons why I went to the police, wanted to assist. And there's a lot of people like Jacqui who assist the police and who assist other people. And, you know, it's always hard to ask, but if there's any way which you can help, then I think you should contact the Pink Ladies organization. I will put the website and the links and everything in for you. Right there, Jacques, I have to thank you for your time. Yes, we had a running battle here with the internet, but that's not our fault. I think the message came across. You have to be very careful, very suspicious even, and you have to know your child. You have to understand if something changes, and you have to have a relationship where you can talk to this child, and you need to know what your child is up to as well. In other words, be a parent. You're not his mate. You're a parent. There's a duty upon you to act like a parent.
Couldn't agree more.
And on that note, I will say goodbye to you for now, but I'm sure, Jacques, you will be back to talk about something else.
There's so much to talk about.
Well, it's not that bad, because what you're talking about is interesting. It's actually life-changing, because we know these people are out there. We know they're after our children, and we do know they're succeeding. That's even worse. They are succeeding. It's a never-ending battle. And therefore, you cannot be neutral about this. You have to join the fight.
I agree wholeheartedly. And thank you so much for doing what you do to assist people like us. It means the absolute world to us.